And it was, as he finished speaking to Saul, that Jonathan's soul had become attached to David's soul. Jonathan loved him as himself, and Saul took him on that day and did not allow him to return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself, and Jonathan stripped himself of the cloak which was on him and gave it to David, and his garments, even to his sword, and even to his bow, and even to his girdle. David went out. Wherever Saul would send him, he would succeed. Accordingly, Saul appointed him over the soldiers, and he was pleasing in the eyes of all the people, and also in the eyes of Saul's servants. And it was when David returned from slaying the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel to sing, and with musical instruments in their hands toward King Saul, with drums, with joy, and with cymbals. Cheering women sang out and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very chagrined, and the matter displeased him, and he said, They ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they ascribed the thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? Saul lied David from that day on. And it was on the morrow that the evil spirit from God rested upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house, and David was playing with his hand like every day, and the spear was in Saul's hand. Saul cast the spear and said, I shall pin David to the wall, and David turned from before him twice. Saul feared David, for the Lord was with him, while he had turned away from Saul. Saul removed him from being with him, and made him for himself a captain over 1,000, and he went out and came in before the people. David was successful in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Saul saw that he was very successful, and he feared him. And all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. Saul said to David, Behold my elder daughter, Merab. I shall give her to you as a wife, but be a warrior for me, and wage the wars of the Lord. For Saul said, Let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. David said to Saul, Who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be a son-in-law to the king? And it was at the time that Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel, the Meholathite, as a wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul said, I shall give her to him, and she will be a snare to him. The hand of the Philistine will be upon him. And Saul said to David, With one of two shall you be my son-in-law today. Saul commanded his servants, Speak to David secretly, saying, Behold, the king desires you, and all his servants love you, and now become the king's son-in-law. Saul's servants spoke these words in David's ears, and David said, Does becoming the king's son-in-law seem to you to be a light thing? For I am poor and lightly esteemed. Saul's servants told him, saying, According to these words, as David spoken. Saul said, So shall you say to David, The king has no desire in a dowry, but in 100 foreskins of Philistines to avenge himself upon the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And his servants told David these words. And the king displeased David to become the king's son-in-law, and the days had not expired. And David arose, and he and his men went. He slew 200 men of the Philistines, brought their foreskins, and he delivered them in full to the king, in order to become the king's son-in-law, and the king gave him Michal, his daughter, as a wife. Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. Saul grew still more afraid of David, and Saul was hostile to David all the days. Princes of the Philistines came out, and it was, as often as they came out, that David was more successful than all Saul's servants, and his name was highly esteemed.